All right, let's take a look at microsystems and imaging. So this is the idea that the body has places or ways that it reflects itself, right? This is like why you would choose certain points in certain areas, why they do what they do. And when I first started to get introduced to this idea, all of a sudden like things started to click. I was like, oh, that's why this point's doing what it does. Originally, you go and you memorize, oh, this point does this, it does this, it does this. But the why, like how come it's showing up here? Why is it doing what it's doing? I never got really good explanations. And now that I've seen the idea of microsystems and imaging, it makes a lot more sense. This is kind of the magic of how you're gonna choose these points and why they're so dynamic. So I suppose you can say that like everything is everything and everything is everything, right? This is the idea that the macrocosm is reflected in the microcosm and that the macrocosm is being reflected in the microcosm, right? So clinically, what does that mean? It means that you can treat the whole body using individual pieces, and you can treat individual pieces with points across the whole body. That's pretty special. What we see are mirrors and images. So a mirror is something that reflects and looks the same. I got a hand and it looks like this one, right? That's a pretty good mirror. So I could use points on this one to treat problems over here. Have you ever had somebody who's come in with like a cast on their arm and you're like, I'm not allowed to needle through that, right? What can I do? You could potentially go to the area of the break on the good arm and needle that one. That's a way that you can use this. Another thing that we talk about is images. So an image is something that's not a mirror, but it's a comparison of areas. So for example, you could say that a limb images the torso. So you could say, I'm going to use the limb, the arm, as an image for the whole torso. And that means that I would say, and this is generally true for these images, that the big joint of the elbow and the knee would superimpose on the navel. And this gives us a really good reference point as to like how to space this out. That means I could use points for the hand to treat the head or the neck. Or I could use points for the hand to treat the abdomen or the groin. We'll talk about flipping those images around, but that's the idea of an image. So a mirror is something that looks the same, right? Not only do you have a mirror image that's for sort of hand for hand and foot for foot, but you could say that a hand is a good mirror image of a foot, right? You've got 5 fingers, 5 toes. Think about the bone structure of the arm. You've got the radius and ulna. You've got the tibia and the fibula, right? You've got the ball and socket joint of the humerus. You've got the ball and socket joint of the femur. Those are really, really good mirrors. That makes a lot of sense, right? The more that you can get those structures to line up and look the same, the more that you're going to find that when you needle it, you're going to get strong clinical results. So that's 2 aspects that we're looking at. Why would these work? Like why does it show up? Why would you be able to take an image or a mirror and use it effectively in the clinic, right? Just because a hand looks like a foot, why would that, turn into something that you can use clinically? Well, for the brain, this is all developed out of the same place neurologically, right? So if you think about like the development in utero, where you've gone and sprouted limb buds and opened up, all of those deep neurological connections were there already. That's why, for example, when you have things like, if you have a neurological disorder, right, where you've, for example, had a stroke, you've got pain or paralysis in a limb, you can use something like mirror box therapy, where you put the healthy limb in a box with a mirror, and now it looks like the other side, and you can light up and open up the neurology that's happening to affect the affected side, because they have strong neurological links. And the more often that image is tight and coordinated and is on the meridian that affects it, you'll get really strong results clinically. So when we needle it, you're going to get big results. So let's take a look at using the torso and the limbs. So you can say that you could line up the limb, an arm for example, with the torso, and you could image the shoulder to the head, okay? And that means that the hand would image to the groin. What if we flip that around? What if we went top to bottom? So if we put the hand up here and had my shoulder down here, the shoulder would image to the hips and the hand would image to the head, okay? And what this means is that you can use points that are distal on the body to image and treat areas that have dysfunction. Okay, let's take a look at a couple of examples of images. So we can go one for one. And by that I mean you can take a whole unit, right? And we can say that a limb is a unit, right? So that limb can be useful to image out and treat another whole limb, right? So we could say shoulder to hip, we could say knee to elbow, we could say hand to foot. Perfect. We can also say that we could take that image of the arm and we could put it on the whole image of the torso, right? So we can use the arm to treat the head, elbow to treat the abdomen, hand to treat the groin. We can flip it the other way. We can use hand to treat the head, elbow to treat the abdomen, shoulder to treat the groin, okay? But we can also take and divide that down. We could use half images. So on the limb, we could cut it in half. Preferably don't do that in the clinic, the blood gets everywhere. But half an image, right? So I got a lower limb. So I could say, hey, I'm gonna use the elbow to the wrist, and I'm gonna use that as an image for the torso. And in this case, I could use problems for like the head, for the elbow, and I could use problems in the wrist down to the groin. Or I can flip that top to bottom, and I can use points on the wrist for the head, and I can use points on the elbow for the groin, okay? And stuff in between, right? I could also divide that again. Why don't I cut it again in half? Boom, okay? So let's say I'm gonna use the lower half of the arm, right? And I'm going to use that as an image. So this would be my head, this would be my groin, or I can flip it around. This can be the head and this can be the groin, right? And you could do that again and again and again and again and again and again. But here's where the problem comes in, right? If you keep dividing this multiple times, a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy is blurry. It loses its effectiveness. This is where the aspect of kind of trial and error in the clinic really behooves us to look at what other people have found, right? So you can always sort of ad-lib and figure out what points you want to use, but you're going to find that in the textbooks, in the tongue style books, that there are points that tend to be really effective. And the reason for this is there's generally higher density of nerve distribution, the meridian connection is really strong, that kind of stuff. But you can potentially keep dividing those down. I think you'll find that if you go kind of to that half of a half, the quarter images, that's about as much as you want to divide, okay, on the single units. Consider you can also, another good division that happens is you can divide things into three. And the reason being is you can divide all of these areas or sections into the three jows, okay? So you could say this is the upper jow, middle jow, lower jow, upper jow, middle jow, lower jow, upper jow, middle jow, lower jow, depending upon what image you want to use, okay? The jows are a good division as well. So those are kind of the strong ones. And you'll find that when you're taking a look at things like tongue textbooks and they say, okay, this point does this, it's generally because of one of those images that show up really, really well. It's either like a full body image, a half, a quarter, or it'll be a functional division of the three jows. Those are when the points become really effective.